Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he secured the last shutter on his farmhouse. The weather reports had been wrong before, but this storm looked different. The sky churned with an unnatural green tint that made his 8-year-old daughter Emma press closer to the window. "Dad, look at those clouds," Emma whispered, her small hand leaving prints on the glass. "They're moving funny." Marcus glanced up from checking the emergency supplies. She was right. The clouds twisted in patterns he'd never seen, almost like they were being stirred by some massive invisible spoon. Lightning flickered inside them, but it wasn't the usual white or blue. This lightning pulsed with colors that hurt to look at directly. "Just a weird storm, sweetheart," he said, though his voice carried doubt. "We've seen plenty of those out here." Living on the edge of civilization had its challenges, but Marcus had chosen this remote farm for good reasons. After Sarah died 3 years ago, he needed space to grieve and raise Emma away from pitying looks and well-meaning neighbors. The nearest town was 40 miles away, and their closest neighbor lived 20 miles in the opposite direction. It was lonely sometimes, but it was peaceful. The first drops of rain hit the metal roof like bullets. Within minutes, the gentle patter became a thunderous drumming that made conversation impossible. Marcus gathered Emma into his arms and carried her away from the windows as the wind began to howl. "Remember the drill," he shouted over the noise. "We go to the basement if it gets worse." Emma nodded, clutching her stuffed elephant. They'd practiced this many times. Living in tornado country meant being prepared for nature's worst moods. But as the hours passed, Marcus realized this was no ordinary storm. The lightning strikes came constantly now, illuminating the farmyard in rapid flashes of impossible colors. The wind didn't just howl, it seemed to scream. And strangest of all, his radio had gone completely silent. Not static, not interference, just dead air across every frequency. Around midnight, something changed. The cacophony outside suddenly muffled, as if someone had thrown a blanket over the entire world. Emma had fallen asleep in his lap on the couch, exhausted by the constant noise. Marcus carefully laid her down and crept to the window. What he saw made his blood freeze. A massive shape was descending through the storm clouds. It wasn't a plane or helicopter. The silhouette was all wrong. It looked almost organic, like a giant manta ray made of metal and glass. As it dropped lower, Marcus could see it was damaged. Pieces fell from its surface, trailing sparks and strange smoke that glowed faintly in the darkness. The craft hit the ground in his north pasture with an impact that shook the house and woke Emma. She sat up, rubbing her eyes as dishes rattled in the kitchen cabinets. "Dad? What was that?" Marcus stared at the faint glow emanating from beyond the hill where the thing had crashed. His practical mind said to stay inside, call the authorities, and wait for someone else to handle whatever this was. But his radio was still dead. His cell phone showed no signal, and something about that glow looked wrong. It was fading, flickering like a dying candle. "Emma, honey, I need you to stay here," he said, grabbing his heavy coat and emergency medical kit. "Lock the door behind me and don't open it for anyone except me." "Where are you going?" Her voice was small and scared. "Someone might be hurt out there. I'll be back soon." He kissed her forehead and stepped into the storm. The rain had lessened but still stung like ice chips. The wind tried to push him back toward the house, but Marcus pressed forward, guided by the fading glow beyond the hill. As he climbed the slope, the temperature dropped noticeably. His breath misted in the air, even though it had been a warm evening before the storm. At the crest of the hill, he stopped and stared. The craft had carved a furrow 200 yards long through his pasture. It was larger than he'd thought. Easily the size of a city bus, but sleeker and covered in what looked like scales that shifted color in the dying light. Steam rose from its surface, and he could hear the tick and ping of cooling metal. Marcus approached carefully, his medical training warring with his survival instincts. If someone was inside that thing, they needed help. But if this was some kind of military craft, experimental or foreign, he might be walking into trouble he couldn't imagine. A section of the craft's surface suddenly irised open like an eye, startling him. Warm air rushed out, carrying scents he'd never smelled before, ozone and flowers and something metallic. Emergency lighting flickered weakly inside, casting moving shadows. "Hello?" Marcus called out. "Is anyone in there?" "I'm a paramedic, I can help." A sound came from inside the craft. Not quite human, but definitely distressed. Marcus pulled out his flashlight and approached the opening. The interior was like nothing he'd ever seen, surfaces curved in impossible ways, covered with symbols that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. But in the center of what might have been a control room, he found her. She was unconscious, slumped over what looked like a pilot seat made of liquid crystal. At first glance, she appeared human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a face with familiar features. But as Marcus drew closer, the differences became apparent. Her skin had a subtle iridescent quality, like oil on water. Her hair was too white, too perfect, and seemed to move slightly even though there was no wind inside the craft. Most striking were her ears, which came to delicate points, and her fingers, which ended in what might have been claws or just very long, metallic nails. Blood, at least he assumed it was blood, though it was a disturbing shade of silver, leaked from a gash on her forehead. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. Whatever she was hurt badly. Marcus's medical training took over. He checked her pulse, rapid but steady, and examined the head wound. It wasn't as bad as it looked, but she likely had a concussion. Her left arm was definitely broken, bent at an angle that made him wince. "Okay, lady," he murmured, opening his medical kit. "I don't know what you are or where you came from, but you're hurt, and I'm not leaving you here to die." As he worked to stabilize her injuries, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his simple life was about to become very complicated. Getting the unconscious woman from the crashed craft to his house proved more difficult than Marcus had expected. She was taller than most humans, nearly 6 feet, and despite her slender build, she felt heavier than she should. Her strange, iridescent skin was cool to the touch, almost cold, and that worried him. The storm had finally begun to break as he carried her across the pasture. Emma met him at the door, her eyes wide with shock when she saw what her father was carrying. "Dad, is she an alien?" "I don't know, sweetheart," Marcus panted as he maneuvered through the doorway. "But she's hurt, and that's what matters right now." He laid the woman on the guest bed and quickly set up his home medical station. Being a paramedic in a rural area meant keeping more supplies at home than most people thought necessary. As he worked to properly clean and bandage her wounds, he noticed more unusual details. Her silver blood clotted faster than human blood should, almost sealing the head wound before he could finish cleaning it. Her broken arm showed signs of accelerated healing too. The swelling was already going down. Most remarkably, tiny symbols appeared and disappeared on her skin, like living tattoos that flickered in and out of existence. "Will she be okay?" Emma asked from the doorway. "I think so. Her body seems to heal differently than ours." Marcus checked the woman's pulse again. "Stronger now, more regular. Why don't you make some tea? The chamomile kind. When she wakes up, she might be scared, and tea always helps with that." Emma nodded and hurried to the kitchen. Marcus was grateful for the task. It would keep his daughter busy while he figured out what to do next. His radio was still dead, his phone had no signal, and he had what was clearly an extraterrestrial being unconscious in his guest room. 20 minutes later, as Emma returned with the tea, the woman's eyes fluttered open. They were the most beautiful eyes Marcus had ever seen. Deep purple like amethysts with flecks of gold that seemed to move like distant stars. But there was something else in those eyes, intelligence, yes, but also a depth of sadness that made his chest tighten. She sat up quickly, too quickly for someone with her injuries, and immediately reached for something at her hip that wasn't there. Her gaze darted around the room, taking in every detail with the intensity of a predator. "Easy," Marcus said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe. You were hurt in a crash. I'm Marcus, and this is my daughter Emma." The woman's eyes fixed on Emma, and something in her expression softened. She spoke then, but the words were like nothing Marcus had ever heard. Melodic and flowing like music made of liquid starlight. "I don't understand," Marcus said. "Do you speak English?" She tilted her head, studying his face with those impossible eyes. Then she pressed 2 fingers to her temple, and one of the shifting symbols on her forehead glowed briefly. When she spoke again, her voice carried a slight accent he couldn't place, but the words were perfectly clear. "I apologize for the confusion. My translation matrix needed a moment to analyze your language." She looked around the room again. "You brought me here? From my ship?" "Your ship crashed in my pasture during the storm. You were hurt." Marcus gestured to her bandaged arm. "I'm a paramedic. I couldn't just leave you there." Something flickered across her face, surprise perhaps, or confusion. "You helped me? Even though you knew I was not of your species?" "You were hurt," Emma said simply, stepping forward with the teacup. "Dad always says that's the only thing that matters when someone needs help." The woman stared at Emma for a long moment, then carefully accepted the tea with her uninjured hand. She sipped it cautiously, and Marcus saw her shoulders relax slightly. "This is pleasant. Thank you, small one." She looked back at Marcus. "I am Zarathel, Empress of the Void-Touched, Keeper of the Crystal Throne, Guardian of—" She stopped herself and shook her head. "I am Zara. That is enough for now." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. Empress? What kind of situation had he stumbled into? "Are there others looking for you?" he asked. "Your people, I mean. Will they come searching?" Zara's expression darkened. "Yes, but not to rescue me." She set down the teacup with hands that trembled slightly. "They come to finish what they started. I am no longer welcome among my own kind. What happened? I made a choice that my people considered unforgivable. I tried to prevent a war that would have destroyed countless worlds, including yours. For this act of mercy, I was declared a traitor and marked for execution." She looked directly at him. "By helping me, you have put yourself and your offspring in grave danger." Emma moved closer to her father. "What kind of danger?" Zara studied the little girl's face, and again Marcus saw that strange softness in her expression. "My people are not cruel by nature, but they are thorough. When they come, and they will come, they will not distinguish between me and those who aided me." Marcus felt his protective instincts surge. He'd dealt with dangerous situations before, but this was beyond anything in his experience. Still, the thought of turning out an injured woman, regardless of her species, went against everything he believed in. "How long do we have?" "Not long. My ship's emergency beacon activated when it crashed. They will track the signal." Zara tried to stand, then sat back down heavily as her injuries reminded her of their presence. "I must leave before they arrive. I will not have innocent blood on my hands." You can barely sit up," Marcus pointed out. "And your ship looked pretty damaged. Can you even fly it?" Zara's composure cracked slightly. "No. The primary systems are destroyed. I am, as you might say, stranded." The reality of the situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. An alien empress, exiled and hunted by her own people, was stuck on Earth in his guest room. Her pursuers were coming, and when they arrived, they would likely kill anyone who had helped her. Marcus looked at his daughter, saw the trust in her eyes, the way she looked at him like he could solve any problem. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made to her to always do what was right no matter how difficult. "Then we'll have to figure something else out," he said finally. Zara stared at him in amazement. "You would risk your life, your child's life, for a stranger? For an alien who has brought nothing but danger to your home?" Marcus glanced at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. "My wife used to say that doing the right thing isn't always the same as doing the safe thing. Besides," he added with a small smile, "Emma's right. When someone needs help, that's the only thing that matters." For the first time since awakening, Zara smiled. It transformed her face completely, making her look less like an otherworldly empress and more like a woman who had forgotten what kindness felt like. "Your species continues to surprise me," she murmured. "Very well, Marcus of Earth. If you are willing to help, then perhaps there is hope yet." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, but it sounded different now. More regular, more rhythmic, almost like engines. The rhythmic thunder grew louder as dawn approached. Zara had been right. Her people were coming. Marcus watched from the kitchen window as 3 dark shapes descended through the clearing clouds, their surfaces rippling like liquid metal. They were smaller than Zara's ship but moved with predatory grace. "Search vessels," Zara explained quietly, standing beside him despite his protests that she should rest. Her broken arm was already moving more freely, though she still favored it. "They will scan everything within 50 miles. My ship's beacon will guide them directly here." Emma pressed against Marcus's other side, her stuffed elephant clutched tightly. "Are they bad aliens, Dad?" "Not bad," Zara said softly. "Just inflexible. They believe they are doing what is right for our people. They cannot see beyond their fear." Marcus turned to her. "What exactly did you do to make them want you dead?" Zara was quiet for a long moment, watching the ship circle like sharks. "Your world was scheduled for what my people call purification. We have done this to thousands of worlds, eliminate the native species before they develop enough to become a threat to our empire. It is policy, ancient and unquestioned." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. "You were going to destroy humanity?" The order had been given. The fleet was assembled. "But She paused, looking down at Emma. I spent time studying your species before the assault. I watched your broadcasts, learned your languages, observed your behavior. What I found was not a threat to be eliminated, but something remarkable. She knelt down to Emma's level, wincing slightly. Your people are capable of incredible kindness. You create beauty for no purpose other than joy. You help strangers without expecting reward. You love fiercely and forgive freely. Among the thousands of species we have encountered, none have shown such heart. Emma stared at her with wide eyes. So you stopped them? I tried. I used my authority as Empress to delay the attack, then spent months gathering evidence of your species' worth. When I presented it to the High Council, they declared me compromised by inferior emotions. When I refused to authorize the purification, they stripped me of my title and ordered my execution. Marcus understood now. You committed treason to save us. I committed truth, Zara replied firmly. But my people see it as betrayal. They will not stop hunting me until I am dead. One of the search ships broke away from the group and headed directly toward their farm. Marcus could see light scanning the ground below it, sweeping back and forth in methodical patterns. We need to hide you, he said urgently. There is nowhere to hide from their scanners. They can detect my biosignature through any material found on your world. Zara stood slowly, her shoulders straight with resignation. I will go to them. Perhaps if I surrender willingly, they will not harm you. No, Emma said firmly, surprising both adults. Dad says we don't give up on people who need help. There has to be another way. Marcus looked at his 8-year-old daughter, saw the determined set of her jaw that reminded him so much of Sarah, and felt a surge of pride. She was right. There had to be another way. Your ship, he said suddenly. Is there anything useful left in it? Weapons, communication equipment, anything? Zara shook her head. The damage was too extensive. Most systems are destroyed, but not all of them. The emergency beacon still functions, obviously. Some life support systems might be salvageable, perhaps a few data cores. She trailed off, her eyes widening. The quantum resonance chamber. What's that? It creates a field that can mask biosignatures from scanners. But it requires massive amounts of power to function, far more than your primitive energy systems could provide. She paused, thinking, unless what? Zara turned to look at Marcus with something approaching hope. Your electromagnetic storm last night, it was not natural, was it? I detected massive energy discharges far beyond what your weather systems should produce. Marcus frowned. You're right. I've lived here for 6 years and never seen anything like it. The storm was created by my ship's arrival. When we enter normal space from hyperspace, our engines release tremendous amounts of exotic energy. That energy has to go somewhere. In this case, it manifested as your impossible storm. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Dad, remember the power lines? They were glowing during the storm. He did remember. The power lines running to their house had flickered with strange light during the worst of the weather. He'd assumed it was just electrical discharge from lightning strikes. The residual energy, Zara said excitedly. It would have been absorbed by your electrical grid. If we could tap into that power source and reroute it to my ship's quantum resonance chamber, we could hide you from their scanners, Marcus finished. For a time, yes. Long enough for the search ships to conclude I perished in the crash and move on to other systems. The approaching search vessel was close now, maybe 5 minutes away. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed insane 24 hours ago. Emma, go pack your emergency bag. Take food, water, and warm clothes. Where are we going, Dad? To fix an alien spaceship, he said, grabbing his tool bag and emergency kit. The matter-of-fact way he said it made Emma giggle despite their dangerous situation. They ran across the pasture under the pale morning light, Zara moving with surprising speed despite her injuries. Behind them, the search vessel began scanning their farmhouse, its lights playing across the windows like seeking fingers. At the crash site, Marcus got his first clear look at Zara's ship in daylight. It was even more remarkable than he'd thought. The scaled surface seemed to shift color as he watched, and the damage was extensive, but not complete. Part of the hull had been torn open, revealing complex machinery that hurt to look at directly. There, Zara pointed to a section near the center of the ship. The quantum resonance chamber is intact, but it needs power. Your electrical lines run past your northern fence. If we could create a connection. Marcus studied the distance between the power lines and the ship. About 300 yards across rough terrain. I have copper wire and some basic electrical equipment, but Nothing rated for the kind of power you're talking about. It does not need to be permanent, Zara said. Just long enough to establish the field. Emma had been exploring the ship's interior and now emerged with something in her hands. What's this? It was flashing. Zara took the device and her expression grew grim. A proximity detector. The search vessel will be here in less than 2 minutes. Marcus looked at the power lines, then at the ship, calculating distances and time. It was going to be close. Very close. Emma, you know where the main electrical panel is in the house? She nodded. When I signal you, I need you to throw the main breaker. Cut all power to the house. Can you do that? I think so. Good girl. He turned to Zara. Show me what needs to be connected. As they worked frantically to jury-rig a power connection between Earth technology and alien systems, the search vessel crested the hill. Its scanning beam swept across the crash site and Marcus felt his heart stop. They were out of time. The scanning beam from the search vessel swept closer to their position as Marcus made the final connection between his hastily assembled power line and Zara's quantum resonance chamber. His hand shook as he twisted copper wires around alien connectors that seemed to reshape themselves to fit. Now, Emma, he shouted. Emma's small form sprinted toward the house as the alien search beam reached the edge of the ship. Marcus held his breath, watching his daughter run faster than he'd ever seen her move. The beam was maybe 20 seconds from detecting them when the power line suddenly blazed with redirected electricity. Zara's hands flew over the alien controls, and the quantum resonance chamber hummed to life. Just as the search beam touched the ship's hull, the air around them shimmered like heat waves. The beam passed right through them. Marcus found himself holding his breath as the search vessel hovered directly overhead. Through the shimmering field, he could see the ship's underside clearly, smooth black metal covered in symbols that shifted and changed. But apparently the crew inside couldn't see them. Remarkable, whispered a voice behind them. Marcus spun around to find a tall figure in form-fitting armor standing at the edge of the concealment field. The newcomer was clearly the same species as Zara, but where she was elegant and graceful, this being radiated barely contained violence. Scars crisscrossed the visible parts of his face and his eyes were cold silver instead of Zara's warm purple. Hello, sister, the armored figure said in accented English. Zara's face went white. Kethvar, you should not be here, should I not? When my beloved sister commits treason and flees into exile, where else would I be? Kethvar stepped fully into the concealment field, and Marcus noticed the weapon at his hip, something that looked like crystallized lightning. You have caused quite the disruption, Zara. The High Council is most displeased. Marcus positioned himself between Kethvar and Emma, who had returned from the house and was staring at the new alien with wide eyes. You are the human who aided her, Kethvar observed, studying Marcus with predatory interest. Curious. Your species shows such potential for violence, yet you choose compassion instead. I cannot decide if this makes you admirable or simply foolish. Maybe both, Marcus replied evenly. Who are you? I am Kethvar, war commander of the Void Fleet and brother to this disgraced exile. His gaze shifted to Zara. I have come to offer you a choice, sister. Return with me now, face judgment with honor, and I will ensure these humans are not harmed when the purification fleet arrives. The purification was cancelled, Zara said desperately. I invoked the right of imperial mercy. By ancient law has been superseded, Kethvar interrupted. The High Council voted. Your mercy was deemed weakness. The purification fleet departed 3 days ago and will arrive within the week. Marcus felt the world tilt around him. A week. Humanity had 1 week before an alien armada arrived to exterminate them. He looked at Emma, saw her confusion and growing fear, and felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. You're going to kill everyone, he said quietly. 7 billion people. It is necessary, Kethvar replied without emotion. Your species grows too quickly, learns too fast. In a few centuries you will develop the technology to threaten our empire. Better to end the threat before it manifests. We're not a threat, Emma said suddenly, stepping out from behind her father. We just want to live. We want to learn and explore and make friends with other people. Kethvar knelt to her level, studying her face with genuine curiosity. And that, small human, is precisely why you are dangerous. Your species' capacity for hope is unprecedented. Hope leads to ambition, ambition to expansion, expansion to conflict. We have seen this pattern countless times. But we're different, Emma insisted. We helped Zara when she was hurt. We didn't even know her, but Dad helped anyway because it was the right thing to do. Something flickered in Kethvar's expression. Yes, that is, unusual. Most species would have either fled in terror or attempted to capture her for study. Marcus saw an opportunity and seized it. What if you're wrong? What if there's another way? Explain. You've observed thousands of species, but have you ever tried to work with any of them? To build something together instead of just destroying them? Kethvar stood slowly. Cooperation with inferior species leads to contamination of purpose. This has been proven. Has it? Or is that just what you've been told? Marcus gestured to Zara. Your sister spent time studying us, really studying us, and it changed her mind. Maybe the problem isn't that other species are inferior. Maybe it's that your people have never given them a chance to prove otherwise. Humans are remarkable, Zara added urgently. Brother, if you could see what I have seen. Their art, their literature, their capacity for growth and change. I have seen their capacity for violence, Kethvar replied coldly. Your people wage wars over resources, territory, ideology. They poison their own world and enslave their own kind. We're learning, Emma said simply. Dad says that's what makes us human. We make mistakes, but we try to do better. Kethvar stared at her for a long moment. You speak truth, small one. But learning takes time, and the High Council believes your species will not have enough time to overcome their violent nature before they become a galactic threat. Above them, the search vessel was beginning to move away, its crew apparently convinced that nothing survived the crash. But Marcus knew their temporary safety meant nothing if a purification fleet was already on its way. What would it take? He asked desperately. What would convince your High Council that humanity deserves a chance? Proof, Kethvar said immediately. Irrefutable evidence that your species possesses something of value to the Empire, something that outweighs the perceived threat. What kind of proof? Kethvar was quiet for a moment, clearly wrestling with something. Finally he spoke. There is a possibility. The architects, Zara's eyes widened. Brother, no. The architect ruins are forbidden. No one has successfully navigated their trials in over 1,000 years. What are the architects? Marcus asked. An ancient species, Zara explained reluctantly. They vanished millions of years ago, but left behind structures throughout the galaxy. These ruins contain technology far beyond even our understanding. The High Council has attempted to claim this technology many times, but the architects built defenses into their structures, trials that test worthiness. Worthiness for what? We do not know, Kethvar admitted, but their technology could revolutionize our entire civilization. If your species could succeed where we have failed, if they could prove themselves worthy of the architect's legacy, the High Council would have to reconsider the purification. Zara finished. It would be proof that humanity possesses something unique and valuable. Marcus felt a spark of hope, but it was tempered by reality. How are we supposed to reach alien ruins? We barely have space travel. Kethvar looked at his sister and something passed between them. A moment of understanding that transcended their current conflict. My ship has the capability, he said slowly. And I have the authority to conduct reconnaissance missions. You would help us? Zara asked in amazement. I would help you help them, Kethvar clarified. If the humans fail, I will personally ensure your death is swift and honorable before the purification fleet arrives. But if they succeed, he paused. If they succeed, perhaps there is wisdom in mercy after all. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Dad, we have to try, right? For everyone? Marcus looked at his 8-year-old daughter, then at the 2 alien siblings whose choices could determine the fate of their entire species. The odds were impossible. The task seemed hopeless, and he had no idea what they were really getting into. But Emma was right. They had to try. What do we need to do? Kethvar's ship was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. Where Zara's vessel had been elegant and organic, this was a weapon made manifest. All sharp angles and predatory curves that seemed to cut through space itself. The interior was cramped but efficient, designed for war rather than exploration. The nearest architect site is in the Kepler system, Kethvar explained as they traveled through hyperspace. The journey that should have taken humanity generations was accomplished in hours. It is a testing facility, abandoned but still functional. If your species can succeed there, it will provide the evidence needed to delay the purification. Emma sat in a chair that had adjusted itself to her small size, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace with wonder. Marcus tried to project calm for her sake, but inside he was terrified. They were traveling to an alien world to attempt trials designed by a species that had vanished before humans had discovered fire. The weight of his entire species' survival rested on whatever they might accomplish there. "Tell me about these trials," he said to Zara, who was monitoring their approach from a secondary console. "Each architect's site is different, but they all test specific qualities: logic, creativity, empathy, courage, sometimes combinations of these." She paused, her expression troubled. "The last expedition my people sent to this particular site included some of our greatest minds. They never returned. What happened to them? Unknown. The site remained sealed after their entry. We assume they failed and were eliminated." Marcus felt his stomach clench. "And you think humans might succeed where your people failed?" "I think humans might approach the problem differently," Zara replied. "Your species has a unique way of finding solutions that seem impossible to others." The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the viewports, Marcus saw a world unlike Earth. 3 silver moons hung in a purple sky above a landscape of crystalline formations that stretched to the horizon. The architect's site sat at the center of it all, a massive structure that seemed to twist reality around itself. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered. It was, and utterly alien. The structure defied easy description. Sometimes it appeared to be a pyramid, sometimes a sphere, sometimes both simultaneously. Geometric patterns flowed across its surface like living things pulsing with soft light. "The entrance will only open for a small group," Kethvar explained as they landed nearby. "No more than 3 individuals. And once you enter, I cannot follow or assist you." Marcus looked at his daughter, then at Zara. "Emma stays with the ship." "No, Dad." Emma's voice was firm in the way that reminded him of Sarah. "You need me." "Absolutely not. This is too dangerous." "The architects designed their trials for complete beings," Zara said quietly. "They valued balance above all else. Adult male and adult female, and a child would represent the full spectrum of human experience." "She's 8 years old," Marcus protested. "And I'm the only kid here," Emma pointed out logically. "If they need to test how humans really are, they need to test all of us, right?" Marcus wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in his daughter's eyes. More than that, he could see the absolute trust she had in him to keep her safe. That trust was both humbling and terrifying. "Very well," Kethvar said. "But understand, if you fail, there will be no second chance. The purification fleet will not be delayed, and both your species and my sister will be destroyed." They approached the architect's structure on foot. Up close, it was even more disorienting. The walls seemed to extend infinitely upward while simultaneously curving back on themselves. Emma reached out to touch the surface, and her hand passed through what had appeared to be solid matter. "Illusion?" Marcus asked. "No," Zara replied, studying readings on a handheld device. "The structure exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. What we perceive depends on our perspective and intent." As they drew closer, symbols began appearing on the structure's surface. They resembled no language Marcus had ever seen, but somehow he found himself understanding their meaning. "Welcome, children of distant stars. Enter and be judged worthy, or enter and be found wanting. The choice, as always, is yours." The entrance materialized as they approached, a simple archway that led into soft blue-white light. Beyond the threshold, Marcus could see a corridor that stretched further than should have been possible, given the structure's exterior dimensions. "Together," he said, taking Emma's hand. Zara took the child's other hand and they stepped through. The sensation was like walking through water made of starlight. For a moment, Marcus felt as though he was dissolving, becoming part of something vast and ancient and incomprehensibly wise. Then they were through, standing in a circular chamber whose walls displayed moving images. Starfields, planets, civilizations rising and falling like waves on an endless shore. "First trial." A voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere. It sounded neither male nor female, neither young nor old. Understanding. "What is the nature of existence?" Emma looked up at Marcus. "Dad, I think they want us to answer a question. But how do we answer something like that? Philosophers have been debating the nature of existence for thousands of years." "Maybe that's the point," Zara suggested. "Perhaps they are not looking for the correct answer, but for how we approach the question." Marcus considered this. The voice had said understanding, not knowledge. Maybe the trial was about how they thought, not what they knew. Existence is connection, Emma said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. I mean, nothing exists by itself, right? Even the smallest thing is connected to everything else, like how the sun connects to the earth and the earth connects to us and we connect to each other. The chamber pulsed with soft light, and the voice spoke again. Perspective acknowledged. Second trial, creativity. Show us something that has never been. Now Marcus was truly stumped. How could they create something that had never existed? The architects had presumably seen countless civilizations, endless variations of art and technology and thought. Something that has never been. Zara mused. Not something new to us, but something genuinely unprecedented. Emma was already moving, gathering dust from the chamber floor and small fragments of crystal that had somehow appeared. Help me, she said to the adults. I need you to tell me about your worlds while I work. As Emma shaped the dust and crystal with her small hands, Marcus and Zara began describing their worlds, their peoples, their experiences. Emma listened intently, adding elements to her creation as they spoke. When she was finished, she had crafted a small sculpture that showed 3 figures, human, alien, and child, standing together beneath stars that were simultaneously familiar and strange. A family that spans species, she explained. Friends who are different but choose to care about each other anyway. That's never happened before, has it? The chamber's light grew brighter, warmer. Innovation recognized. Final trial, sacrifice. What will you give up for others? This time the question hung in the air like a weight. Marcus felt the truth of it immediately. This wasn't asking what they would hypothetically sacrifice, but what they were willing to give up right here, right now. My life, he said without hesitation. To save my daughter, my species, my world, my title, my people, my place among the stars, Zara added. To prevent unnecessary death. Emma looked at both adults, then spoke in a voice far too mature for her 8 years. My dad. If saving everyone means he has to stay here forever, I'll let him go. Because that's what love means, wanting the best for someone even when it hurts. The chamber exploded with light, and Marcus felt that sensation of dissolution again. But this time, instead of fear, he felt acceptance, understanding, completion. When the light faded, they stood in a different chamber entirely. This one contained a single pedestal, and floating above it was an object of impossible beauty. A crystal that contained what looked like a miniature galaxy, complete with swirling stars and nebulae. The inheritance, the voice said, and now Marcus could hear something like approval in its tone. Awarded to those who understand that strength comes not from dominance but from unity, not from conquest but from compassion. Take this proof of worthiness, children of distant stars, and know that the architects see in your species a hope we had not dared to imagine. Marcus reached for the crystal, and as his fingers closed around it, he felt the weight of cosmic approval settle over them. They had done it. Somehow, impossibly, they had passed the trials. The journey back to Earth passed in a haze of exhaustion and disbelief. Marcus held the architect crystal carefully, still hardly believing what they had accomplished. The small device pulsed with gentle light, and occasionally he caught glimpses of vast knowledge swirling within its depths, star maps, technology beyond human understanding, and something else that felt like wisdom itself. Emma had fallen asleep against Zara's shoulder, completely drained by their ordeal. The alien Empress stroked the child's hair gently, her expression soft with an emotion Marcus was only beginning to recognize as maternal affection. You care about her, he observed quietly. Your offspring is remarkable, Zara replied. Her mind works in ways that even we find difficult to comprehend. She sees connections where others see only separation. Kethvar, piloting the ship, spoke without turning around. The High Council will not accept this easily. They have committed resources to the purification. To halt it now would require admitting error. But they have to listen to the evidence, Marcus protested. This is proof from the architects themselves. The architects have been silent for millions of years. There will be those who claim this is fabricated, or that the trials have been corrupted by time. Kethavar's tone carried the weight of someone who understood politics and power. We will need more than just the crystal. Zara straightened, careful not to wake Emma. There is a way. The inheritance does not just contain knowledge, it can demonstrate that knowledge. If we could show the High Council what humanity is truly capable of— What do you mean? Marcus asked. The crystal contains technological templates, advancement pathways that could accelerate your species' development by thousands of years. If the High Council could see humanity as potential equals rather than primitive threats, they might reconsider. Marcus felt a chill of unease. You're talking about fundamentally changing our entire civilization. Perhaps, Zara admitted. But consider the alternative. In 5 days, the purification fleet will arrive. Every human being will die unless we can convince the High Council to call off the attack. Emma stirred in Zara's arms, mumbling something about tea and starships. Despite everything, Marcus smiled. Even unconscious, his daughter was thinking about kindness and adventure. How would it work? He asked. Kethvar activated a holographic display showing Earth's solar system. The crystal can interface with your planet's information networks. It could upload fundamental advances in energy production, space travel, medical technology, enough to demonstrate your species' potential for rapid advancement. But that would change everything, Marcus said. Our entire society, our way of life. Your species already stands at the threshold of such changes, Zara pointed out. Your internet, your space programs, your medical research, you are naturally progressing toward these discoveries. The inheritance would simply accelerate the timeline. Marcus thought about the implications. Clean energy that could end environmental destruction. Medical advances that could eliminate diseases. Space technology that could take humanity to the stars. It was everything his species had dreamed of, but forced upon them rather than earned through natural progress. There's another problem, he said. Even if we convince your High Council, how do we explain this to humanity? Aliens appear, share advanced technology, and expect people to just accept it? Humans have proven remarkably adaptable, Kethvar observed. Your fiction is filled with scenarios exactly like this. Perhaps your species has been unconsciously preparing for this moment. Emma woke up as they entered Earth's solar system. She blinked sleepily, then sat up straight as she remembered where they were. Are we home, Dad? Almost, sweetheart. She looked out at the blue marble of Earth hanging in space, then at the crystal in Marcus's hands. The pretty rock is going to help everyone, isn't it? We hope so. Good. Emma's simple acceptance of their cosmic situation never ceased to amaze him. When do we tell people about Zara and Kethvar? That was the question Marcus had been dreading. How do you tell the world that aliens exist, that they nearly faced extinction, and that 3 people, including an 8-year-old girl, had somehow saved them all? Carefully, Zara said. Your species will need time to adjust to the reality of galactic civilization. Perhaps we begin with your scientists, your leaders. No, Emma interrupted. We start with our neighbors, Mrs. Patterson and Tom from the feed store and Dr. Martinez from town. Real people. They're not scary like big important people can be. Marcus stared at his daughter, then started laughing. It was exactly the kind of simple human logic that had gotten them through the architect trials. She's right, he said. We introduce Zara to the community first. Let people get to know her as a person before they worry about her being an alien. Kethvar looked skeptical. You would trust such a momentous revelation to random individuals? They're not random, Marcus replied. They're my neighbors. They're the people who brought casseroles when my wife died, who help with the harvest, who watch Emma when I have to work late. If anyone can accept Zara for who she is rather than what she is, it's them. As they approached Earth, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. In his hands, he held technology that could transform human civilization. In his guest room back on the farm, he had an alien refugee who had given up everything to save his species. And in his heart, he had a growing certainty that the hardest part was just beginning. The ship touched down in his north pasture just as the sun was setting. The wreckage of Zara's original craft still lay where it had fallen, now cold and dark. But somehow, the sight of his farmhouse with its warm yellow windows made everything feel possible again. Home, Emma announced with satisfaction. Zara looked around at the familiar landscape, the rolling hills, the fence lines, the distant tree line where deer sometimes grazed in the evening. It is beautiful, she said softly. I understand now why you fought so hard to protect it. Kethvar remained in his ship, monitoring communications from the approaching purification fleet. You have 4 days, he called out as they prepared to leave. 4 days to implement the inheritance technology. and convince the High Council that humanity deserves to survive. Marcus nodded, clutching the crystal tightly. 4 days to save the world. As they walked toward the house, Emma slipped her hand into his. Dad? Yes, sweetheart? Are you scared? Marcus looked down at his daughter, then at Zara walking beside them, and realized that despite everything, the impossible odds, the alien technology, the fate of billions hanging in the balance, he wasn't scared. Overwhelmed, yes. Uncertain, absolutely. But not scared. No, he said finally. I'm not scared. We've gotten this far by helping each other and doing the right thing. I think that's going to be enough. Emma squeezed his hand. Me too. Behind them, Kethvar's ship powered down for the night. Above them, the stars wheeled in their courses, indifferent to the small drama playing out on one particular farm on one particular world. But in that moment, walking toward home with his daughter and their alien friend, Marcus felt like they were exactly where they needed to be. The real work was about to begin. 4 days. Marcus stared at the architect crystal sitting on his kitchen table, its inner light casting rainbow patterns across the walls. Outside, Kethvar's ship maintained its silent vigil while somewhere beyond the stars, a purification fleet drew closer to Earth with each passing hour. Emma sat beside Zara at the table, both of them poring over children's books as the alien Empress continued learning about human culture. It was surreal. An exiled alien royalty helping his daughter with her reading while the fate of civilization hung in the balance. The first step is integration, Zara explained as she turned a page of Emma's picture book. The crystal needs to interface with your global communication network. From there, it can begin uploading the technological frameworks. Marcus nodded, though the technical aspects were far beyond his expertise. And you're sure this won't cause some kind of system collapse? Our infrastructure isn't exactly designed for alien technology. The architects were remarkably thorough in their designs. The integration will appear as natural technological breakthroughs, occurring simultaneously across your world. Your scientists will believe they've made independent discoveries, but some people will figure out the truth eventually. Yes, which is why we must prepare your community first. They will need to vouch for our intentions when the larger world begins asking questions. Emma looked up from her book. When are we going to tell Mrs. Patterson? She's coming over tomorrow to bring us vegetables from her garden. Marcus had been dreading this moment, but Emma was right. Mrs. Patterson would be their first test, a 70-year-old widow who had been their closest neighbor for 6 years. If anyone could accept the impossible with grace, it would be her. The next morning arrived gray and overcast with storm clouds building on the horizon. Marcus watched from the kitchen window as Mrs. Patterson's old pickup truck bumped down the dirt road toward their farm. Beside him, Zara fidgeted nervously with her clothes, one of Sarah's old dresses that fit her surprisingly well. Remember, Marcus said softly, you're just a friend who needed help. We'll explain the rest gradually. Zara nodded, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. An Empress who had faced down Galactic councils was nervous about meeting a country. Grandmother. Mrs. Patterson knocked on the door with her usual rhythmic pattern, 3 quick raps followed by 2 slower ones. Marcus opened it to find her standing on the porch with a basket of fresh tomatoes and her warmest smile. Morning, Marcus. I thought you and Emma might. She stopped mid-sentence as she saw Zara standing behind him. Her eyes widened, taking in the alien woman's 2 perfect features and slightly pointed ears. Mrs. Patterson, Marcus said carefully, I'd like you to meet Zara. She's been staying with us for a few days. The elderly woman studied Zara with the sharp eyes of someone who had raised 5 children and survived 80 years of life's surprises. After a moment that felt like an eternity, she smiled. Well, aren't you lovely? You must be the friend Emma mentioned when she called yesterday. Mrs. Patterson stepped inside, setting down her basket. I hope Marcus has been treating you properly. Men living alone sometimes forget their manners. Emma bounced into the room, immediately hugging Mrs. Patterson around the waist. She's really nice, Mrs. P. She knows lots of stories and she helped me with my math homework. Did she now? Mrs. Patterson looked at Zara with renewed interest. Are you a teacher, dear? I was. In my previous life. Zara's voice carried only the slightest hint of her accent. They settled in the living room with coffee and fresh tomatoes. Mrs. Patterson chatted easily about her garden, the weather and local gossip, seemingly unfazed by Zara's unusual appearance. But Marcus caught the occasional sharp glance, the way the older woman's eyes lingered on Zara's ears, or the subtle iridescence of her skin. Finally, after Emma had run outside to play, Mrs. Patterson set down her coffee cup and looked directly at Zara. "So," she said calmly, "what planet are you from, dear?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt his heart stop, but Zara simply smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since they'd returned to Earth. "You are remarkably perceptive, Mrs. Patterson. Honey, I've lived through the space race, the computer revolution, and the internet. I've seen enough science fiction movies with my grandchildren to recognize the real thing when it walks into my living room." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "The question is, are you here to help us or hurt us?" "To help," Zara said firmly. "Though I fear my presence has brought danger you could never have imagined." Mrs. Patterson listened without interruption as Zara explained everything. The purification fleet, the trials, the architect technology, and the impossible deadline they now faced. When the alien Empress finished speaking, the elderly woman was quiet for several minutes. "Well," she said finally, "that's quite a story. Good thing Emma's father has always been the helpful type." She turned to Marcus. "What do you need me to do?" The simple acceptance floored him. No hysteria, no disbelief, just practical concern and willingness to help. This was why he'd chosen to live in a small community. People here understood that sometimes you simply dealt with whatever life threw at you. "We need to tell the others," Marcus said. "Tom, Dr. Martinez, the Hendersons, the whole community. When this becomes public, and it will, they need to know the truth so they can help explain it to the outside world." Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. "I'll call around. Tell folks we're having an emergency community meeting tonight. Won't be the first time we've had to pull together in a crisis." That evening, 23 of Marcus's neighbors gathered in his living room and spilled out into the kitchen. Tom from the feed store, Dr. Martinez who ran the local clinic, the Henderson family who owned the neighboring ranch, old Pete who fixed everyone's tractors, and others who made up the small community that had become his extended family. Marcus stood before them with the architect crystal in his hands, Zara beside him looking nervous but determined. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor in front, her absolute faith in the assembled adults giving him courage. "Folks," he began, "I need to tell you something that's going to sound impossible. But I need you to listen. Really listen, because in 3 days it's going to matter more than anything has ever mattered before." He told them everything. The storm, the crash, Zara's identity, the approaching fleet, the trials, and the technology that could save them all. When he finished, the room was silent except for the tick of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Tom was the first to speak. "So you're saying aliens want to kill us all? But this lady here risked her life to save us, and now we've got some kind of super technology that might convince them to leave us alone?" "That's about the size of it," Marcus replied. Dr. Martinez raised her hand. "The medical advances you mentioned, they could really cure cancer, genetic diseases, aging itself, and more," Zara confirmed. "The architects mapped the biological patterns of thousands of species. Their medical knowledge is comprehensive." Pete scratched his beard thoughtfully. "This crystal thing, it's safe? Won't blow up the internet or turn everyone's phones into toasters?" Despite the tension, several people chuckled. It was such a Pete question. Practical, slightly absurd, but getting to the heart of real concerns. "The integration is designed to be seamless," Zara assured him. "Your existing technology will simply begin working better, faster, more efficiently. New discoveries will emerge naturally from research that's already in progress." Mrs. Henderson, a former school teacher, looked directly at Zara. "What happens to you after all this? Do you go home?" Zara's expression grew sad. "I have no home to return to. My people consider me a traitor. If they allow humanity to survive, I will likely spend the rest of my life in exile." Emma stood up suddenly. "She can stay here with us. That's what families do, they take care of each other." The simple declaration from an 8-year-old seemed to settle something in the room. Marcus saw nods, smiles, and the kind of determined expressions he'd learned to associate with his neighbors when they'd made up their minds about something. "All right then," Mrs. Patterson said briskly. "What do we need to do?" Marcus looked around the room at these ordinary people who had just accepted the extraordinary, with typical rural pragmatism. Farmers and mechanics, teachers and retirees united by the simple conviction that when someone needed help, you provided it. We activate the inheritance, he said, holding up the crystal. We trust that humanity is ready for what comes next. And we prepare to explain to the world that we're not alone anymore. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. As if responding to his words, the crystal pulsed with brighter light. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, but this time, Marcus knew it was just a storm. They had work to do, and 3 days to save the world. But looking around at his neighbors, at his daughter, at the alien woman who had become part of his family, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. Hope.